Okay, I think we're going to get started. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thanks to the panelists who are here this morning with us. Thanks to Varti, who's on the screen in California, and at 6 in the morning for her. And thanks also to Sue in New York. It's a snowstorm in Montreal, and so for those of you, all of you who made it here, either from Toronto or from the suburbs or wherever, again, thank you for being here. We have an incredible panel today, and all I wanted to do this morning, this month of International Women's Day, International Women's Month, would be to introduce our our five incredible panelists, and then our talk will be moderated by a law student who I'll introduce in a second. So, in alphabetical order, and sitting to my extreme left is Karen Abu Gaber. Karen is a Senior Director, Legal Affairs, Transat AT. She manages litigation in various fields, including aviation law, civil liability, commercial disputes, employment law, class actions, and consumer protection. Ms. Abu Gaber also ensures regulatory compliance of the group's various operational activities. In addition, she oversees trademark portfolio and provides legal advice on various issues to all business units. It sounds really like you do all legal work. Before joining Transat AT, Ms. Abu Gaber practiced civil and commercial litigation for 10 years with various law firms in Montreal. She also worked as a lawyer in the office of the prosecutor of the Special Court for Sierra Leone and clerked at the Quebec Court of Appeal. Ms. Abu Gaber holds a Bachelor of Arts from Carleton, a license in civil law, and a Bachelor of Laws cum laude from University of Ottawa. Ms. Abu Gaber was admitted to the Quebec Bar in 2002 and is also a trademark agent. Right next to me is Sona Bedrosian. Sona earned both a bachelor's degree in civil law and a Juris Doctor in common law from the University of Montreal. In 2023, she also completed a mini MBA at McGill University. She specialized in co-ownership law in private practice from 2012 to 2016 and transitioned to Flight Hub and JustFly in 2017 as the sole in-house counsel, where she spearheaded the establishment of the company's internal legal framework. During her time as general counsel and compliance officer at Flight Hub and JustFly, she demonstrated exceptional leadership and integrating cutting-edge technology and data-driven approaches into the establishment of the company's internal legal and compliance framework. Leveraging her expertise, she implemented innovative solutions to navigate complex legal landscapes. Moreover, during her tenure, Sona played a pivotal role in the company's emergence from Companies Creditors Arrangements Act, CCAA, and Chapter 15 protection amid the severe downturn induced by COVID-19. Sona Bedrosian's commitment to excellence in legal and compliance, coupled with her innovative use of technology and data, earned her the prestigious Association of Corporate Counsel Global Top 10 30-somethings award in 2023. This recognition further underscores her impact on the intersection of legal strategy and technological advancement within the corporate landscape. Suzanne Kizian, on the screen with us today in New York, more than 20 years of experience in real estate law industry. Susan has a significant transactional experience in the area of real estate development with a particular focus on real estate leasing. Susan is Vice President, Associate General Counsel at Urban Edge Properties, a real estate investment trust focused on managing, acquiring, developing shopping centers in urban communities within the United States. Susan was born and raised in Montreal, where she graduated from the University of Ottawa in Ontario and has a civil law degree as well as a common law degree. She's a member of the New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts bars, and also a member of the Quebec bar, which she says she will never give up. Susan started her career working at a law firm as a litigation attorney in Montreal, Quebec. And after practicing in that area for approximately 5 years, she decided to switch gears to become a transactional lawyer. She moved to Boston, Boston, Massachusetts area, she says, where she started her real estate law career as in-house counsel for a family-owned real estate developer in Cambridge. This was a lifetime opportunity for Susan, which subsequently opened many doors for her and led to career development. Thereafter, she doesn't talk about the fact that she was invited in the job for a little while. Thereafter, Susan moved to New York City, where she currently resides and greatly enjoys spending time in Central Park. Varti Hindoyan, joining us also online, is Associate General Counsel for Marketing Legal Team at Meta, formerly known as Facebook. She advises business units on cutting-edge and multifaceted consumer-facing marketing initiatives that span the globe on intellectual property, advertising, consumer protection, privacy, and related regulatory matters. She's a strategic and action-oriented attorney focusing on advancing businesses, protecting brands, and advising teams in evolving legal and technological landscapes. Prior to joining Meta, Varti served as in-house counsel at Disney, supporting the consumer products commercialization segments on marketing, licensing, and retail matters. Before going in-house, Varti was a former litigator who began her career at O'Melveny and Myers. During her years in private practice, Varti represented a wide range of clients from Fortune 100 companies to independent film developers, often on bet the company litigation. Varti holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Pennsylvania and a Juris Doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. She also serves as the co-chair of the Armenian Bar Association Young Lawyers Committee. Dalita Kasarjian is joins us from Genetech as a senior legal counsel, global privacy manager, where she has been since August 2022. She provides legal counsel and support on a wide range of technology-related matters, included but not limited to data privacy, cybersecurity, regulatory compliance. She assists the general counsel and associate general counsel in all aspects of legal oversight and risk management. Dalita is sitting between Sona and Karen. Before joining Genetech, Dalita was at ABB, AZ Brown Boveri, for a 3-year period. And before that, she was deeply involved in the pharmaceutical industry, having worked for 8 years at Novartis and as a legal director and legal business partner and lead attorney overseeing legal support to the Canadian NBS organization. Before that, she was a senior legal counsel and data privacy officer at Novartis. And prior to her experience at Novartis, was at Pfizer for about 3 years. Dalita is also a graduate of University of Ottawa and holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Montreal. Moderating our panel, and who is just to my right and will be moving in my seat when I'm finished with these intros, is Lara Hovagimian, is a second-year law student at McGill. She did a BA at U of T in history and political science, passionate about exploring the intersections of law, business, and human rights, and aims to contribute to the advancement of justice in these fields. Besides her passion for law, she has a keen interest in cultures and histories of the Middle East. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. You're at La Pointe Rosenstein, Marchand Melançon, and this is an Armenian Bar Association webinar, combined webinar and in-person seminar. I thank you all for being here. And Lara, I will give my seat to you, and we can start hearing from our panelists and have you continue with moderation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and welcome. This event is Inside Legal, exploring the pleasures and perils of in-house counsel. So I'm going to start by asking a very general question. What's a day in the life of in-house counsel like? And Karen, we can start with you.
All right, thank you, Lara. So a day in my life as in-house counsel can be so different from one day to the next. I could start my day reviewing a contract, moving on to an employment matter, and handling a litigation. And then all of a sudden, there's a crisis, whether it's an incident at a destination, because we are an airline company, a tour operator, and we have passengers who are in various destinations around the world. And if there's something that happens, we need to get on that. And then there's social media and traditional media. which can often be a source of risk for us because as an airline, we are often in the headlines and we need to manage those risks and try and handle those situations as best we can.
Thank you. And Susan, what is a day in the life of being in-house counsel?
Yes, so thank you. I have to say that it's typically fast, and while you get pulled in all sorts of different directions. So I have my day planned, and sometimes I advise executives on various legal topics. I research legal issues relating to the company's business. And sometimes I manage outside counsel or external parties, whether it's vendors or partners. And I sometimes draft legal documents, contracts, or agreements. And then in general, I provide legal guidance to the entire company on various and complex matters. And I wanted to give 3 tips on this, on how to allocate your time. And so I just wanted to say that time allocation is critical when you're in-house counsel. And the first tip I want to give is I want to tell you to slow down to speed up. And so when you're first joining an in-house company, do not plan 10 things on your calendar. It's easier to just have less matters, 4 or 5, and to accomplish them as opposed to have 10 things and you only get to 1 because you're pulled in different directions. And matters always take longer than you think. That's number 1. Number 2, give yourself a time buffer at the end of your day. In your calendar, I suggest that you plan at least 30 minutes of free time because you don't know what could happen. You could be, your meeting could run over. You could be pulled, by someone in an urgent project. An executive could walk into your office and they can tell you, I need your help right now, so you have to drop everything. And so you want to make sure that you have enough time to take care of those unforeseen events. So that's number 2. Number 3, I want to give the 3rd tip is that reminders make you smart. And so if you're reviewing a matter, there will be open items sometimes. And I suggest that you not leave this to memory and to jot it down on a piece of paper and put that on top of your folder. And so that way, let's say you close your file and you have to get to it in a week, chances are you won't remember. And a lot of people look to the attorney to actually remember everything. And so you want to become a reliable source. And so the best way to do this is to have a page where it says reminder, put your open item. And that way, when you open the file the next time around, it's right in front of you. And so reminders make you smart. And that's my contribution to that question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. My next question is for you, Vati. Why did you choose to move in-house?
Thank you so much, Laura. For me, I honestly was going to quit the law if I continued doing litigation. So I figured it was quite an expensive endeavor and I probably should try something else before completely throwing it out the window. And I made the right decision. I loved it. I had gotten tired, frankly, of private practice where I was getting frustrated at the clients who kept doing stupid things and then getting sued. Or now I get to be the client that does the stupid things that upsets the outside counsel. But true, like being serious about this a little bit, it's a very different pace of life and a different type of work being in-house. I feel like you get integrated so much more with the business. We call them clients too, like for private counsel, we're the clients. And you really have to be their problem solver. It's not enough, right, to have the right legal answer or I have no idea what the legal answer is because there is no law on this. But you have to figure out that gray space and try to get to a good solution. And I really enjoy that portion of it. And I always joke half the job is just telling people what to do. And that part's not too bad either.
Thank you. And Sona, why did you choose to move in-house?
So I resonate with a lot of the points that Vati raised. But I would say for me, primarily is the duality of the role. I think that's extremely stimulating because you have your legal hat, but you also have your business hat, which pushes your boundaries that you normally would not in private practice. The variety of the mandates. So no day is the same. You can get pulled left and right. One day you'll be sitting with the board talking about international expansion. To the next day, and I'm speaking from experience, we're talking about filing for CCAA, right? Because of the pandemic and the many different situations that are happening. So naturally, you become very versatile and you truly become a generalist because you dabble into many different areas of the law. I would say another thing as well is you're developing your skill set. So when you're in private practice, we're all your peers. Fortunately, we're all lawyers. So you're trained the same, you think the same. So you won't be developing certain skill sets that you normally would in-house because you're surrounded, with a CEO who's like a serial entrepreneur. You have the CFO that's coming from a finance background, your tax folks, your HR folks. So that naturally propels you to develop certain skill sets, such as your business acumen, to be more solution driven, to be creative and think outside of the box. And I think for me, that's something that I absolutely enjoyed. The other thing I would say is adaptability. So you have to be very agile in your environment because the business needs will change constantly, and you need to be able to pivot with the business needs. So naturally, that again enhances not only your own professional skill set, but also your personal development too. So I think all of those combined, I would say for me, it's really why I chose to move in-house.
Thank you so much, Sona. My next question is for you, Dalita. You're the only one we haven't heard from yet. What was your biggest surprise when you moved in-house?
So I think we just started. It hasn't been very long, but we're already, I think, all on the same page and with our answers and pretty much aligned. So again, here too, some distinctions or unique, I guess, things that really come at you when you go into an organization now, into a company, in-house. First of all, something very simple, like really the physical environment. So you walk in and the offices even look different. It's not set up the same way, depending on the size of organization. You're now, especially in legal, typically with the C-suite, you're on a different floor. And the other thing is now, like we just mentioned, you're not only working with lawyers all the time. Yes, you have your own legal team, definitely, and legal professionals you're working with. But in-house, now all of a sudden, and depending on the industry you're with, you're either working with, very different and smart, different types of people coming from either medical backgrounds, they're either pharmacists, they're either engineers. So quickly you realize that, oh, this environment is a lot different. I'm not just doing pure legal work, working with legal counsels all day long, like Sona was mentioning too. Now all of a sudden you're part of the business and you're one department, one team amongst everybody else. So you're not just, it's not all about the lawyers, all about the firm. It's about, okay, I'm in this organization. I need to quickly understand what's my role within this greater body. So you have to align behind the mission and the vision of what's going on and rally behind everybody towards that same goal. And so even though if you have what we call like internal clients, now you're servicing your colleagues, you don't view them anymore as clients. You're all part of a team. They're your colleagues, they're your teammates, they're people you're having lunch with. You're trying to get to understand their world, their background. So although, we all come from, good professional backgrounds and educations, while, I, for example, didn't go to medical school, I didn't go to pharmacy school. Now I'm in a pharma company, for example, or if I'm in an engineering company, we're working with software developers or people working in oil and gas and that type of engineering firm. You really have to now all of a sudden pivot everything you've learned and try to understand now their world and their space. So I think that's one big difference about being in-house is that, like we discussed, understanding that business, being a part of that. The other thing that you notice is that, well, we mentioned it, we'll talk about it again, I'm sure, it's that, you're, yes, acting as a lawyer, they're looking to you for legal advice, but honestly, nobody cares about your 5-page memo. They really want the quick and dirty. It's about, how fast can you tell me, what can I do? And honestly, they're all very smart people. And, they're dealing with a lot of different issues that you probably haven't even dealt with yet. Like they have a lot of experience from where they're coming from. So they will literally come to you with a lot of the gray people know about the black and white. They don't need your advice on the black and white. It's typically very complex, and they come to you with situations where they push you to think outside the box as well. So they're in a competitive environment. You're working with marketing folks. They need to be competitive, stay competitive. So they need you. Do you need to help them understand, okay, what's the sandbox, and let's brainstorm together as a team to be able to, push the boundaries as much as we can. And not to take too much time, but just finally also, one thing that I noticed was that, there's so many meetings when you start going in-house. And, Susan mentioned about, trying to manage your calendar and your schedule. And honestly, she's totally right. Like, don't be ambitious and have 10 items on your to-do list, because you may not even get through 2 of them sometimes, because you're pulled in urgencies or different matters that are coming up. And typically you have to manage the meetings, because it can get meeting heavy, and you don't want to get to a place where you need everybody to disappear and go home so you can get to your work and your files, because it can sometimes get to that. So you have to manage that. And maybe the little elephant in the room about the billable hours. So we don't have that either in-house. However, it is different, but you still have, when you're part of an organization, and different hierarchies and management and reporting roles and lines. So you'll have definitely, your objectives for the year, your, mid-year reviews, your quarterly reviews, you have KPIs. So perhaps, similar in a law firm, but it's not that same, billable, mentality. That being said, it's definitely go, 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 and not a walk in the park. So not quiet on that front, but just a little bit different.
Thank you. Karen, what was your biggest surprise when you moved in-house?
So when I moved in-house, the director at the time said, okay, so just bear in mind, you're not in a law firm anymore. So the typical ego of lawyers and law firms, check that at the door, because you need to come in here. And as Dalita was saying, you're now one of us. You're a team member, you're a colleague. Get over yourself. And you might be a lawyer, but you're just one of us. So that was a bit of a shock after having been in private practice for 10 years. And then there's obviously the volume. Our corporation, before the pandemic, we were 5,000 employees. And though we don't have billable hours, sometimes I said to myself, maybe we should, because all these people are calling me to ask me these silly questions. Do they know how much it costs to speak to me? And so that was a surprise, because I didn't realize that they can just access me as often, as much as they like. And I think there are times where I was frustrated, because it's kind of the easy way out to just call legal. And sometimes it's frustrating to say, well, did you read the contract? You're the one who's going to sign it. You need to understand it. I can review it and make sure there are no risks for the corporation. You need to understand what it says. And I think that was a bit of a surprise as well. I think, as Dalita was saying, when you're surrounded with a certain type of professional, and having been in private practice, it was mostly lawyers, you come in and you're like, well, the things that were obvious to us as lawyers, they're not so obvious to the business people.
Thank you for the insight. My next question is for you, Susan. What are the key challenges and opportunities that legal professionals typically encounter during their transition from private practice to in-house work? And how does this shift their role, their responsibilities, and their professional development?
Sure, thank you, Letta. So I'll address that in 2 parts. The first one is the key challenges and opportunities to transitioning from a law firm to an in-house setting. So a lot of attorneys will start off in a law firm setting. That's how their career starts, and they just, they're there for a few years, and then they decide to go in-house. And so I'm going to name 4 challenges, and I'm going to name 4 opportunities. So the first challenge is you have multiple clients in a firm versus one client when you go in-house. And therefore, this means that it is imperative that you acquire knowledge about your company and your company's industry. So that means, number one, when you first join a company, you have to understand the company terms that they use, the lingo. In our company, there is a construction department, but they don't call it the construction department. They call it the development department. So that was a change for me. The second, we're still in the first challenge. So another way that you can overcome the one client issue is that there are numerous websites that you can access to actually learn about your company and the industry. I'm going to give some American references. So Bloomberg is one, Yahoo Finance, Forbes, Wall Street Journal. So you have a lot of tools at your disposition to learn actually about the well-being of your company. And that is very helpful. And I suggest everybody who's joining a company in-house for the first time to actually use these resources. And then actually CLEs are also an excellent tool to help you keep abreast of the new developments in the area of law that you're practicing in, and to actually understand how other people have done it. You don't have to recreate the wheel. Other people have paved the way. So a CLE is a great tool. So that's the first challenge, multiple clients versus one client, and getting to know your client very well. Number two is know your audience. And Dalita actually brushed up upon this, is you're not operating just as a lawyer. You're going to be wearing different hats, and you're going to be dealing with different people. And the person that's actually requesting your feedback does not really know all the legal terms. So the memos that you're going to draft are going to be shorter, and you have to understand how they want the information presented. They don't have as much time, and their attention span is shorter. And so you're not going to be presenting a 5-page memo in legalese. You're going to be doing a bullet point email oftentimes. It's going to be short, concise. And then you also have to know how they like the memo presented or the email. Do you give the answer at the top, or do you give them a long rundown? So these are all important. So to know your audience and how they want the information presented. Number three is to find the information key holders. That means that every department has one person, one or two people that have the information, and that's not necessarily the leader of the department. So your job is to find out who that person is, scope it out. And sometimes it's not the leader of the department who's the stakeholder of information. It could be one or two levels down. So keep that in mind. And number four, another challenge, which is the last one, is in a law firm, you're an income producer, and versus at a law firm, you're a cost center. So at a law firm, you're a rainmaker, you're bringing in business, you're bringing in revenue, and you have more resources available to you. At a company, which is, you're part of the business, it means that you're a cost center. And a lot of companies are profit oriented. And so they look into cutting costs, which means you might have less resources that you do at a law firm, less staff, not as sophisticated management software. So you have to deal with that. So those were the four challenges. And now I will move on to opportunities. And so as Dalita said again, the first opportunity is no more billable hours. When I moved from a law firm to an in-house setting, it was very different for me, because I was like, I don't know how to live. How am I going to live without reporting like my billable hours in 6-minute increments? So that was a big change, but it's a wonderful transition that you never take for granted after that. And then moving on to the second opportunity, Sona mentioned this, you get to expand your skill set and practice in new areas. So you're going in-house, you're part of a business, you're going to be wearing different hats, not just the legal hat. You could be making business decisions, and you will probably be involved in, marketing, intellectual property, information technology, real estate. You just don't know, but that really helps you roll up your sleeves and learn how the company operates. And the third benefit is timely feedback on your performance. In a law firm, I find that you get an annual review, and you get to see how you're doing. In an in-house setting, you will see that people do not hold back. They will comment on your performance right away, whether it's good or bad. They will tell you to your face or to your supervisor. And that way you're getting feedback on an ongoing basis. And you could see it negatively, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity to actually improve your skills and see how you operate and adjust. So the timely feedback, I think, is really great to adjust your performance. And then number 4, which is, I think, the best one, the best opportunity is it gives you a work-life balance. At a law firm, you are expected to work longer hours, sacrifice your vacation sometimes. Many times I was ready to leave at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I was called in to work all weekend. So it happens less in-house, where you follow the corporate schedule, the company hours. You're more flexible. It allows for work-life balance. You can take your vacations without feeling a lot of guilt. You can enjoy them. And because of that, I find in-house positions are very coveted and it's very competitive. So I think those of us who are fortunate to get an in-house position, I think that we really are grateful for the opportunity and do appreciate the entire setup. So that's what I have to contribute.
Thank you so much for your insight, Susan. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
Vasi, I have the same question for you. What are the key challenges and opportunities that you encountered whenever you transitioned from private practice to in-house work?
The biggest one for me initially was I was a general litigator, and then I went into a completely different space, right? I went into consumer products, and I was a transactional attorney, and when I went into Disney. Frankly, nothing I knew about. What you quickly realize is that we're not doing rocket science. So you really do, like, you can pick up almost anything. Most of our skills are very transferable. Most of the knowledge is very transferable. But the learning curve in the beginning is two things, and that I think a couple of people have mentioned a little bit of. One, that people need answers immediately. They call you with like the weirdest legal issues, and they think that you are an encyclopedia that can just like spit it out very quickly with the answer. And so as type A lawyers, people are like ready to give answers, sometimes remembering to take a step back to say, that's an interesting issue. Let me think about it and get back to you if you have the time. Sometimes you have to still give your gut reaction and say, I'm thinking XYZ, this may not be a good idea, or we might have to do something else to get you to your destination, essentially. So really taking a beat with that, but recognizing the speed at which the business moves at and the way they expect you and to be a source of information. The second one is how much business advice you actually end up giving that has nothing to do with legal issues. Because you are a sounding board, and at the end of the day, and it depends on where you are and who you're dealing with. So for example, when I first started at Disney, some of the people I were working with were like 22-year-old, 23-year-old, fresh out of college, like hadn't held a job maybe potentially before, didn't know what the heck they were doing, professionals. So really they were the ones negotiating their contract and making very questionable judgments as to like the information they were sharing. For example, I remember one of my clients said, oh, I was talking to this vendor and I told him my budget is $400,000 and now their cost is $400,000. I have no more budget to do anything else. I'm like, well, that was a stupid decision. That has nothing to do with legal, but like you walk them through how to do things a little bit better, right? Or there's other pieces where you'll give them the advice, and there's some lawyers who feel like, oh, I gave the advice, now it's the business's decision to take a call, to make the action. But you find when the more senior you get, they rely on you to help make that decision, right? To help make that business decision and really quantify what that risk is and whether it's worth it to the company, because you know, and your goals are aligned, right? Which is the success of the business, to launch a product, to do whatever it is that's at the table that day. So I think those two were the most, I think, getting to used to challenge, like at the front end when you switch in-house. But I love that now. I thrive in that, and it's so much more fun and interesting, I think, and makes part of the very day. And the final bit, which I think I'm the most different here from the rest of the panelists, is that you do have, depending on where you go and the type of job you take, you actually have an ability to either be a generalist, which was my last job, or become a ridiculous specialist, right? certain companies like mine, which have way too many lawyers employed, like I think we're in the thousands at our company of just lawyers, you do end up getting very narrow and deep in certain areas. So I've become a marketing attorney. So I deal with ad issues all day long. I joke that I tell people that you can't steal other people's IP, you can't lie about what we do, and then there's like the data privacy collection. So I haven't thought of something pitty for that portion yet. But really, I don't deal with non-marketing or advertising issues in the space with those clients. And that's at my current job at Meta. So that's been really interesting where I get to be this subject matter expert and really going in like at the cutting edge of the laws, learning and trying to become the expert and then teaching others within the company about it. So that's been a really amazing opportunity that I don't think I foresaw when I first moved in-house, but as I was in, I took the opportunities to like move around within that.
Thank you so much for offering us a little bit of a different perspective. So my next question is for you, Sona. What skills and traits do you need to succeed as an in-house counsel? And what would you say are the differences in the skill sets required between working in a private practice or working in-house?
So going back to a little bit what I was mentioning earlier, when you're in-house, you're really partaking in growth opportunities, and especially in a tech environment. So my organization was a very typical startup tech environment. So I want to preface by saying that you get an opportunity for buy-in as well, right? So your skill sets naturally, you need to have a leadership mindset. You need to be a forward thinker. You need to be solution driven and think outside of the box. Now, there's a fantastic book that I highly recommend for everybody to read. I know the audience in front of me is primarily private practice, but you're welcome to read it as well. Or for attorneys looking to either transition in-house or those that are in-house, the book is called The Inside Counsel Revolution. And the author makes a very interesting statement where he says, you go from being a traditional practitioner, a technical expert, to a wise counselor. And that's true in every sense of that sentence, because you're not only acting as a guardian to the corporation, but you're also acting as a partner to the board. And we spoke a little about legalese and the heavy legal jargon, and that's fundamentally true when it comes to in-house, because you can't come in with your heavy, like 20-page legal memos. We leave that to external counsel. If we need to kind of mandate something very specific, in which once we receive, we're going to kind of put that in a digestible format for our C-suite. But you have to speak their language. And, a tip that I often give is something as simple as change your terminology when you're speaking to your stakeholders. So rather than coming in and saying, well, the law says A, B, C, this is why it's illegal, you should just change that adage to, does this make sense strategically? And simply making that change, what I've noticed is not only are you engaging your stakeholder to think as well about what can be some of the legal challenges, but you're also undertaking this collaborative process where you're exchanging different ideas and solutions. So really, you need to be able to balance your legal knowledge with your business acumen, your communication skills, your adaptability, like we mentioned, and your innovative, approach. Now, another thing I would say, what I've noticed, and again, I want to mention, I'm speaking really from a perspective of you're starting in a startup tech environment that's exponentially growing. An organization like Vartis, which is much more streamlined in processes, there's a lot, bigger and more robust legal teams, it might look different. But when you're in a startup environment, this is again contrary to private practice, you're not given mandates. So in private practice, most likely, especially in the beginning, you're going to come in, you kind of have more of a structure, you know what mandates you need to work on. But in my case, in my experience, it's almost like I had a canvas and I needed to figure out and paint my canvas. And it was my C-suite that, as GC, expected me to determine what the legal roadmap is going to look like and how will I be an equal partner to the business and how will the legal department contribute. So there's a 3-step process that I highly recommend. Your step 1, regardless in what kind of environment you are, it's absolutely vital for you to understand the business. I can't state this enough because I've noticed there's often many in-house counsels that struggle because they don't understand the different facets of their business. What does that mean? understand your revenue streams, understand what are my marketing channels, understand how do we generate sales, how's my HR operating. By doing that exercise, not only are you fostering a relationship of trust with your stakeholders, but you're also getting a huge visibility on what are their objectives, what are their challenges, and how do I align my legal priorities in order to move the needle. Because once again, you're trying to break the mold of legal is a bottleneck. We don't want to come see legal. We just want to deploy as quickly as possible. So you want to be, at the forefront of it and not at the end. Your second step, I would say, is do your SWOT analysis. So this is something that, again, we see often in business, but it's, again, vital for, in my opinion, when you're starting and trying to implement your legal roadmap. So what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my opportunities? What are my threats? Once you've done your SWOT analysis, then you're able to set the key here, the key word, realistic objectives with timelines. Often I've seen, again, many in-house counsels that are going to set very unrealistic objectives. They're not able to meet their KPIs. And then they're kind of back to square one where they're trying to determine, well, what was the issue? What did we do wrong, right? Once you've done your step one and your step two, you go to your step three, which is, all right, I've identified what my legal roadmap is. So now you need to ask yourself, what does my current legal structure look like? Should I make changes? Should I hire a data privacy officer? Should I hire an in-house junior counsel? Should I hire a paralegal? And your second step is you want to identify technological solutions that you can use in order to improve your efficiency, to operate, in a more conducive way, streamline your processes, and also enhance compliance. And I'll get to that component a little later on as we're discussing. But once you've done this three-step process, the discussion then becomes seamless when you're meeting with your CEO, because you don't need to debate on what is the value of the legal department, why do you want to invest in XYZ technology, because now you have a very clear set legal roadmap. You know exactly what your objectives are, you know exactly what tools you need in order to attain those objectives, and you've aligned them with the business priorities. So I think you always need to think not only individually as your department, what are the priorities, but how do I align them with the business? So I would say I think that would be my recommendation.
Thank you
and the
so
primary
much.
difference.
Thank you, Sona. And Lalita, in your opinion, what would you say is the biggest trait that you would need to succeed in-house?
I echo everything Sona just said, definitely. For me, if you can take away maybe one word or one trait, I would say collaboration. I think collaboration is definitely key. And I don't mean collaboration from a nice, fuzzy feeling standpoint of view where I need to be friendly with everyone. It's collaboration. Yes, you need to have, good relationships, but why? It's also a very strategic trait to have, because you're going to quickly realize when you're in-house that you can't necessarily take a decision on your own. Depending also on the size of organization, you're going to realize that there are a lot of people that you need to align with. You need also a lot of different departments and people to be able to contribute towards your research or matter, whatever it is that you're working on, in order to get to that solution. So I know it's very cheesy. We hear it often. Teamwork makes the dream work, but that's literally what it is. You're not alone taking decisions. And oftentimes you have to also not check in, but it's part of that alignment and being strategic as well. If you want the solution to go out smoothly for a matter, to be resolved smoothly, you have to have the internal alignments ahead of time. So you don't show up to a meeting and say, drop this big bomb. You align with everybody before, and by everybody, I mean not just locally your departments that are horizontal, but also vertically. So who's, above you, it's very hierarchical, at times, depending again on size of corporation, but you have your own, colleagues, GC, there's regional folks you have to check in with, there's global folks. The last thing you want is for people above you to hear of something happening in a local country. And often what you're doing in one setting in one country may have an impact, elsewhere in the world. So you have to also be mindful of what's going on in other jurisdictions, connect with those colleagues as well. So it depends again on the matters, but that collaboration is key. So collaboration in order to get your job done, in order to be very strategic on how you're getting it done. And so that definitely helps. And another thing I think we touched upon definitely is this having this, sense or spirit of servitude, because again, you're a supporting function. And so you're not, let's say sales and marketing that are viewed as the ones bringing in, all the business. So you have to be there understanding that your role is really to service the business and there to really get, the necessary decisions out the door quickly and swiftly. And in order to do that, I know we said, numerous times, you need to understand your business. So how you do that again is by asking questions, doing your research. So don't be shy. You need to have courage because again, we come from technical backgrounds. Sometimes we're, saying, oh my goodness, intimidated. Now it's a different environment, things I may not know, not understand. Like Varti said, you learn very quickly. You have the skill set. So have the confidence, have the courage, speak to the right people, ask the right questions. And all of that boils down to collaboration.
My next question leads perfectly into this topic because it's about teamwork. So how would you say teamwork differs in in-house settings versus in firm work?
Again, teamwork, not to be repetitive of what we just said, but you need, a lot of different people in order to help you, get to where you need to get and make those decisions and calls. And you need to be an enabler. We mentioned it again, you're not there to, say, well, I don't believe this is a sound decision. No, nobody really cares, to be honest. They have objectives. They want to get it done. They want to know, tell me how to get it done in the best way possible. So it's not really a no, it's yes, how. Obviously, everybody understands there's a certain sandbox we need to work within. But that teamwork, again, comes down to, let's all, put our minds together. I'll bring you, what I need to bring from a legal perspective, but you can't get it done without other departments as well. And so, again, yeah, collaboration and teamwork is key for sure.
Thank you. That's a great takeaway. Karen, my next question is for you. So how can legal professionals effectively manage and diffuse conflicts with difficult personalities, for instance, in the workplace, while upholding professionalism in an in-house environment?
Right. So obviously, as some of my colleagues here mentioned earlier, the idea is to make money. Everybody wants to make money. And obviously, when you want to make money, you have to make sure that you will not suffer any consequence that will cost you money. And so I think the best way to explain things to people who may have this objective of, I want to do this and I don't want to hear what you have to say, dumb it down and explain to them the risk that is involved with that particular decision. And obviously there's some legislation that will carry important fines, prison terms for certain board members. So that makes them a little bit more weary and they don't want to bear the burden of having made the decision that ultimately led to that consequence. So I think, they're very driven to make money, but they need to understand, and sometimes our views don't align, but it's important to make them understand what the consequence of their decisions are.
Thank you. My next question is for Vati. Working for a huge company like Meta, can you talk about the international dimensions of your work and how that guides your practice? How do global companies such as Meta, for instance, navigate compliance requirements in multiple jurisdictions, which vary significantly depending on local laws and regulations, etc.?
Yeah, I probably should have mentioned, excuse me, that one of the other surprises is how international my job is. I'm a US trained, US based lawyer, but I am responsible for global activations and also our North American and Latin American marketing lawyer, right? So I'm expected to know the laws in Canada and Brazil and Argentina, etc. And frankly, Europe and Singapore and China, where we technically don't operate. But, it's an interesting space. Like you have to be generally caught up, understand not just the laws as they are written within a space, but how they are enforced in a country and what other regulatory or litigation risks you're facing. For example, there are certain regions where we are under more of a microscope than in other ones, right? And sometimes the laws that we're asked to comply with, if we comply with every single law in every jurisdiction, you can't, because the law in one country, it contradicts with what you need to do in a different country. So you actually cannot operationalize something that complies everywhere else. So some of the things we do from the advising side as a business unit lawyer, or et cetera, is focus from from a scalable factor, like for the business, we ask them, what is your key markets, right? Do you only care to launch in the US, or do you want this to be as global as possible, or where are we looking for growth? So we sometimes focus on the key regions. And then we flag the most problematic jurisdictions. So if you want to expand in Europe, for example, you have to do X, Y, Z. So if you don't build that now, you probably won't be able to expand. So you have to make the trade-offs. The business needs to make the trade-offs as you discuss those opportunities. Frankly, there are some countries we don't care about, right? Because we don't have users in a certain space, or because, as I said, there's no regulatory scrutiny, or if the law exists, there's no enforcement mechanism. So it's just not worth anyone's time or money to deal with that situation. But the other piece is sometimes like there isn't a law, or the law is, so I'll give an example of like Brazil and Europe in privacy spaces. Brazil's tech laws as written are actually far behind what EU's laws are from a privacy perspective, but that doesn't stop Brazil from being a very litigious country and the regulators from being very active. So sometimes we may do things that potentially go above and beyond because we're under certain scrutiny or having conversations with regulators. The other things that a company like Admeta's size has is we actually have policy and regulatory people that what they're literally doing day in and day out are speaking to these regulators and discussing the laws, actively lobbying to change the laws, et cetera. So it's a multi-pronged approach, and there's actually lawyers that are doing those jobs, right? So this was where I was talking about, like at certain companies that are large enough, you get to specialize and do different things that you wouldn't even think about that were possible as a lawyer, from like the advocacy side, then the litigation side, the advising side. But I can't, so when my clients come to me and say, I want to do this thing, I can never say, okay, this is the law in the US now, like, let's go figure out somewhere else. I always have to start with a global lens or ask, is this US only, which it never is. And then go from there and provide the guidance of how we can slice and dice what they need to do to be able to get to a good enough solution that gets their business objectives.
Now, Karen, can you talk about the international dimensions of your work?
For sure, as an airline, there's quite a bit of international dimension. So we obviously have teams that work on making sure that we're allowed to fly where we want to fly. There are teams who have to ensure that for privacy reasons, you're compliant in Europe. When the GDPR came out, everybody was thinking, well, I'm a Canadian company. What does that have to do with me? I do business with them, but my folks are here. And so it was really an eye-opener to realize, okay, this is a piece of legislation that has a really big extraterritorial scope. So reach, thank you. And so you kind of have to start thinking, like Vati was saying, okay, I can't just look at this problem from a Canadian point of view or an American point of view. I have to look at it from a global point of view. And from an IT perspective, I obviously oversee the portfolio of trademarks. And when my marketing folks come up with brilliant ideas and I want to go ahead and register a trademark, well, I can't just be looking at the Canadian perspective, because I need to make sure that when my plane is going to land in Morocco, my IP will be protected there. So unfortunately, this research to check all the jurisdictions, if I can register in this country and that country, takes a lot of time, effort, money. And so when we start, we kind of want to make them focus and not come up with 100 different ideas and make them tell me, okay, can you check all these? Well, no, you need to narrow your scope so that we can focus on what it is that we really want to do and eliminate as we go along the things that we cannot do. Otherwise, we have a lot of legislation, regulation that touches air passengers. So the protection that is in place in Canada may not be the same as that in Europe. And so you might be compliant by doing something in Europe, but it's not really the same thing in Canada. So you have to always take that into consideration. It makes for very complicated matters at time, but it's interesting, and I wouldn't trade it in.
Thank you so much, Karen. So now my next question is for you. What strategies can tech companies implement to balance compliance with legal regulations, ethical principles, and building trust with customers amidst the rapid advancements and developments in things such as social media, technology, artificial intelligence, etc.?
So naturally, in a fast-paced environment of tech companies, creation and innovation is at the heart of the organization. So you often have a very entrepreneurial mindset, and embedding compliance can be transformational. So it's really about balancing innovation and entrepreneurial spirit, but all the while ensuring that people understand the importance of governance and regulation. So for me, it was vital to instill the idea that every individual department can, by embedding compliance from early on, would yield to a positive result. So what do we mean by that? I'm a very visual person. I love giving examples. So I'll give you a concrete example in my organization. We have Easter's coming up. Our marketing folks, we're a B2C, want to launch a promotional email to say we have 20% discount on the flights. Now, sitting down with my marketing folks prior to launching this email and looking at the content of that email, ensuring that the representations are clear and concise, they're not misleading, what happens is the following. So I'm a consumer. I'm going to get that email. I'm going to understand what the value proposition is of that email. I'm going to find it enticing, which is going to bring me onto the platform. Now that I'm onto my platform, my marketing folks are happy. Then what's going to happen is the consumer is going to continue with its shopping experience. We have ancillaries, right? We're selling seat requests. We're selling insurance. So the product is clear and concise. The consumer is going to understand what the value is. We'll decide to select and purchase a seat. We'll decide to select and purchase insurance. So my product folks are happy. The consumer continues its experience, decides to book, is happy with the pricing and itinerary. So what happens is my revenue folks now are happy because they actually got a booking. Lastly, this customer finishes his experience, ends up calling his friend and says, wow, I found not only an amazing deal with this OTA, but you should actually go. And I know we talked about you wanted to do a summer trip. So go on their platform and you should book as well. And let me leave a positive review. So what happens is my customer service department team now is happy. So one action positively impacts so many different folks. And I think sitting down and showing concretely and having this example is what I find in my organization was very helpful in order to embed compliance. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about conflict and how do you kind of go about that if you're having challenging point of views. What I find useful is try to find concrete external examples. And what do I mean by that? So again, this is all public information. I don't remember the exact period, maybe it was last year. Expedia had terminated its relationship with Hopper because they felt that, Hopper's product offerings were not very clear and that they didn't see what the value proposition is. Well, what does that mean for an OTA like us? That means we get extra market share in the business and possibly even a partnership with Expedia. So why? What's the primary difference between us and Hopper? Well, once again, taking the step to make sure everything is compliant, we're actually gaining in the long run. So one positive action has really a whole trickling effect. And how does that translate to legal? Well, you're breaking the mold that legal is not a revenue generating department. This is something that we often hear. Legal is viewed, again, as a bottleneck. We're a cost center. We don't generate revenue. But no, now we are able to show that by these actions, actually, wait a minute, I did generate revenue because the customer came and did all those booking, and here are the stats to determine that. Now, another thing I would say, example, for me, was key to understand, when you're in a B2C, there's a whole phenomenon of what a customer complaint looks like. It actually goes from tier 1 all the way to your legal complaint. Now, when it reached legal complaint, for me, I needed to have data. I wanted to understand and have visibility, to see what are my KPIs. So I needed a system to be able to understand what's my average handle time. What was the cost of the organization? What did the customer complain about? Which product? Was it something related to marketing? Was it related to a product? Was it the pricing issue, itinerary issue? So once again, when you're able to gather that data, what happens is you get visibility and you're able to have informed discussions with the relevant stakeholders and embed and have a specific tailored action plan when it comes to compliance, maybe it's additional training that you want to do, maybe it's revisiting something. Now, what I found very helpful as well, and I say this often, so we're all professionals, but at the end of the day, we have one thing in common is we're all consumers. So I'm sure we've all experienced an experience that we've gone on a website and we're like, wow, loved it. This was a great shopping experience. And we've had the opposite where we're like, this was, ridiculous. I'm not going back. And then you're going to tell your peers. So what I found particularly helpful is I told my legal team, I said, look, we're going to put our consumer hats on. We're going to go on the platform and do the booking from A to Z. We're going to analyze and see every single aspect of what that experience is like. And we're going to jot down what we think. We even went further and called our call centers and act like we're a customer just to see how my agents answering. Do they understand the product they're selling? Do they understand the restrictions associated to the product they're selling? Do they understand the difference between what an OTA can do and what an airline can do, right? Because it's two different entities. We're often binded by the terms of what the airline sets, which consumers often don't understand. So doing that, what happened is you gather all this data, you're then able to sit down with your sales folks, and we were able to kind of concise what our findings were and see where were the pivotal pain points, I should say, of the whole shopping experience. In addition to that, you use different AI tools as well in the organization to develop certain dashboards, where I remember we had a very brilliant director of product technology who had developed a fantastic dashboard in our organization that was able to give us visibility on, okay, how many agents are on lunch right now? How many agents are answering calls? How long is it taking for this agent to communicate with the customer? What was the issue? But having that data point allowed us and enabled us to have visibility to know how can we improve overall as a company and what can we do to innovate further. That same director of product technology was also working on using AI to develop a chatbot, right? So when you develop a chatbot, what happens is the customer doesn't need to call again, have long hold calls, because they're actually able to have different interactions through chat and see how they're able to answer the questions. So what does that mean in the long run? You're reducing your call volume. So our headcount with respect to, let's say, service agents that need to put fires out are getting reduced. Now, the key I would really say is we shouldn't be afraid of technology. I know we hear so many things out there with, Chat GPT and like the regulations. Yes, there's a lot of intricacies, but technology really drives efficiency, and it really allows you to allocate resources that you normally would not have, and allows you to streamline processes. So there's many different tools that you can use, that can help you within the legal department, whether that's contract management software, which I think is key. I mean, God knows how many NDAs I would get in the organization, maybe 30 NDAs like a week. And I didn't find personally it was efficient for myself or my team to sit down and look at all these NDAs. But now if you have like a proper software, you're able to embed a template, you have what your key clauses are, and you empower your stakeholders. So I would tell my director of marketing, if you get an NDA, you don't even need to come see me. I trust you. Look at the template, do a cross parallel. And if you see something that really stands out, then come and let's have a discussion. If you also have, let's say, another thing that's great with the AI platforms is that you're able to put in, let's say, what are your key clauses? What is the clause for you? Let's say you have an ultimate great limitation of liability clause. Well, by having that in, what happens is your junior, let's say, who's reviewing a contract already has a good basis. They don't need to come knock on your door 3-4 times to try to look and see what should be done. So we should not be afraid to use these tools. Common subject that I often despise is legal billables. I hate it. At the end of each month, we're having a debate with the CFO, and then I would have to call external counsel between CFO, and we're arguing over legal spend. So I wanted to put this to bed and have a proper tracking system. Now I know exactly who my law firms are, whether it's US, Canadian, European. I accrue a budget per mandate. My CFO has great visibility. And then at the end of the month, it's efficient with my time. I don't need to sit down and have a meeting. It's efficient with my CFO's time and also with the external counsel, because I know external lawyers too, that's the one thing they hate, getting calls and then you're arguing over billables. So now everybody's on the same wavelength. There's a specific mandate that's given with a budget that's accrued, and nobody needs to kind of debate over what the issue is. So there's many different tools that we can use and leverage technology and the data that we have in order to create efficiency within the legal department. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Sona. I have a question, similar question for you, Vati. What is your take on what strategies tech companies can implement, especially working for a tech company that's as huge as Meta?
Honestly, I don't think that the strategies are different for a tech company versus a non-tech companies. I came from a non-tech one before I got here. What is different is risk appetite and tolerance for the company and where they want to be and what, you know, the regulatory space they operate. So one, I think for lawyers to understand that about their company, so that then they can build the right, like the appropriate tools and the appropriate solutions for or advice on that. But really the biggest issue, I think, on the compliance front, and I think Karen kind of alluded to this, right? Like we're used to working with lawyers. Everyone, you start with our lawyers and things that you thought were obvious are actually not obvious to the business. And so it's all about training and scaled resources and scaled operations and that have the compliance as the baseline or whatever that level of compliance is. There are going to be different things for different departments and potentially different companies, right? Some companies have to worry about privacy and data protection more, although that's almost everybody these days, but that's more front and center for some people. Like product recalls and other things might be more front and center for other companies. FDA regulators, sorry, US focused here, so could be other issues for some companies. But what I've found works really well is if you can figure out what the highest volume of low-ish risk or what can be translated into low-risk situations that are coming your way to get them to a baseline is create checklists and processes for these clients, right? So we went, for example, my team across Meta and the marketing space, I think there are like thousands and thousands of marketing collateral created on a monthly basis across the company. There's no way any team can or should be looking at all of those things. So we created systems that were like, here are the big issues where we'll potentially get a complaint. Here's a checklist, follow the checklist, right? Like, and we created systems that can spot like, if you answer a questionnaire, they'll tell you whether this is a low risk item versus a high risk item. The high risk item will go to one of our paralegals or lawyers. A low risk one will go give you the checklist and tell you to be on your way. Similarly, creating regular interactions and trainings with the clients and the business groups. So I find that I have regular like road mapping exercises with the clients to figure out what's on the horizon. So then I can tell them ahead of time as they're thinking through these things, what are the big challenges? But along that, I'll give them regular updates and trainings, especially for me, data privacy is a huge space and it's literally changing every single month in some instances. So I'll have regular check-ins with the clients, say, hey, here's where you have to worry about like laws relating to youth data and laws relating to some other privacy issues that are high level enough, but get the clients to a good place where they understand what's coming so that they're not surprised and are not planning to do things that are going to be a huge challenge down the road. So you're setting up a good baseline and partnership of education on the front end, because that's not what's on their mind. Their job is to do something different than what your job is. Our job is to help bring them along and get them to from A to Z in a way where they're getting sued the least and fined the least. I don't think you can ever get to zero in companies like mine. But so for me, the scaled resources of like the checklist, playbooks, whatever it is that are easily digestible by the business that on their day-to-day pieces, and the trainings are probably the best way you can get like compliance built into the systems essentially on the issues you want.
Dalita, my next question is for you. What do you look for when choosing outside counsel? How can outside counsel be most helpful to you and the company that you work for?
I think similarly to how we have to interact with our businesses when we said understanding the business, providing practical solutions, I think that is kind of the same mentality and what we're looking for when we're looking outside as well for the support. It's important, I think, to be able to build a relationship also with your outside counsel, because you don't want to have to re-explain context and everything every time you go to them. So when they know you, they know your business, you have that relationship, so you're able to get them to give you very practical advice. And what do we mean by practical? Again, help me understand the risk, help me understand what are the big things I need to worry about, because now I need to internally balance those risks to be able to mitigate the necessary internally and relay that to management, relay that to my colleagues. Another thing that we talked about or touched upon, like VART2, I do a lot of privacy. So it's an interesting time when you talk privacy. I do, cybersecurity, and now AI comes into that mix. So it's an interesting time because going outside, you want to make sure that you have people around you that are, experts in this space. And a lot of the time, the laws, like we've mentioned in these spaces, are developing so quickly on a daily basis that you want to make sure that your partners that are outside have, their pulse on that. And so they're aware of the latest developments. They're able to give you some kind of guidance. I think, especially in AI, a lot of folks are navigating this space now together. And so if you have partners that are on top of that, that are able to, support you in those spaces, that's always definitely helpful. So to find the experts in, evolving spaces, I think that's very key today, because, it's not like traditional maybe topics where you've built that expertise and you can go to those experts. Now, I think we're evolving so much that not sure everybody is already an expert in these spaces. And so it's being able to find those folks. And one thing I appreciate also is, because we're so busy, we're so bogged down, we do get a lot of bulletins and memos and interesting, updates. But if somebody can kind of concisely send you like a monthly or some kind of report to say, okay, here in a nutshell, here's something that would be helpful to you, I appreciate that as well. And I know, especially in privacy, like Karen mentioned it also, VART2, the laws are extraterritorial most of the time. So you go to an outside counsel in one jurisdiction, but you're working, in a global environment. So, okay, nice here, but then help me understand, how am I going to develop a policy that's going to be able to be kind of like jurisdiction neutral? Or how do I, dissect this in a way that it's not heavy for the organization? So it's having folks also that, yes, you go to European outside counsel, you go to South American outside counsel, but it's nice to know that although they can't give you, opinions in a jurisdiction outside of theirs, that they have that awareness, they have that understanding to help you then, bridge all of that and put the pieces together, so that then you can have something that's eloquent and, digestible for your business folks, that's easy to understand. And so navigating all of those different spaces, I think, are key. And again, having partners at your disposal who understand you and understand that you need to move fast and are, adapting to new environments and are able to give you practical solutions.
If I can just add quickly a point to what Dalida was saying. I think for me, what I found particularly distinctive on who we decided to move forward with external counsel is, believe it or not, there were so many counsels, they never even booked on our platform. So they didn't really understand what the business is. But for me, what stood out is when I was speaking to external counsel and was like, by the way, I did a booking and I got this and I noticed this. So understand your business doesn't just mean relying on internal GC to come and explain to you all the facets of the business, because again, you're operating in a very fast environment. You're limited in time if you don't have that many resources. But I think depending on what your area is, it makes a huge difference. Has, again, in my situation, has the counsel been on an airline and booked with an airline? Can they compare what their experience is with an airline with an OTA? Have they been, let's say, on a Kiwi, which is an aggregator? Do they understand? So just the basics, not going in the nitty gritty, but at least if they can understand the basics of what your business is and how it operates, I think that goes a long way, because oftentimes you're going to get legal advice that's very in-depth, But when they don't understand the business, it's extremely apparent. Like you're able to kind of pinpoint that right away. And I think that's a huge factor that we look at when we're trying to hire outside counsel.
Thank you. Karen, I have the same question for you. What do you look for when hiring outside counsel?
So I agree with these ladies. And as Sona was adding, I think it's important for them to understand the business, because the advice they're going to give me needs to also keep in mind of the reputational risk. Sometimes I get advice and it, from a legal point of view, it makes complete sense. But from a reputational point of view, I'm like, oh, I can't do that. That's completely ludicrous. And so, especially with ESG, DEI, these are big issues. And for airlines, no need to tell you, we're always in the headlines. And most recently, accessibility has become a very, very big issue in Canada, and rightly so. And so we need external counsel to understand these nuances so that when they are telling us to do X, Y, and Z, they're bearing in mind what it will mean for us on a reputational level.
Thank you, Karen.
I have a
Vati,
question.
I have a question.
Sorry to interrupt, Lara. I just want to ask Karen, when you say accessibility is a big issue in Canada, can you elaborate on that? I'm curious.
Yes, sure. So 30, 40 years ago, people would get on a plane and you would walk on and you would walk off. And accessibility is basically allowing somebody who's not able to walk onto the plane with their legs and needs a wheelchair. This was not a concern for most airlines 40 years ago. Today, it's important. And we need to allow people who are in wheelchairs or who have mobility aids to get on the aircraft. And again, it's made headlines. We've seen some atrocious pictures of passengers who have tried to get on, have tried to get off aircraft. It's not, it's really, it's unfortunate. The dignity of the person is obviously affected, and you want to be able to allow everybody the opportunity to travel. It's not because you're in a wheelchair that you shouldn't be able to travel. And that's going to have a big impact on not just airlines, but manufacturers. Boeing and Airbus are going to have to design aircraft, and hopefully one day the passenger will be able to wheel in their wheelchair and have it strapped down properly, so they don't even have to transfer into a small aircraft seat, which may be very difficult, very painful. So, we need to bear that in mind. And there's many players in the industry, as well as the manufacturers. There's the ground handlers. So when we land at an airport, there are third parties who accompany our passengers towards the airport. And so we need to make sure that the facilities on the ground are going to allow people with mobility issues to also access the airport. But it's not just physical, believe it or not. Some issues with anxiety have made it necessary for us to accommodate people who need to travel with a service animal, not just blind people, but people who have anxiety and who need to have their pet to stay calm in the aircraft. So there's a lot of things that would have never crossed anybody's mind 40 years ago, but times are changing, thankfully, and we need to take into account all these needs.
Thank you,
Karen.
Vati, my next question is for you. You said you were very involved in the Armenian Bar Association, especially the youth chapter. Can you talk about what it's like to be an Armenian woman in law, and what does it mean to you?
Sure. So when I went to law school, first of all, I have no one in my family that went to college, let alone law school. So I was the first person born in this country, right? Like in the US from my family. So it was everywhere I went, I was a first. And when I went to my college, maybe not the first, but I was like one of 3 Armenians in my college. When I went to my law school, I was one of 3 Armenians, one in each year in my law school. So I was excited that there were 3 of us. When I went into my law firm, I was the only Armenian at my law firm. One of the places I was working, I eventually got hired there, but when speaking with one of the partners at the firm, I was a junior here, excuse me. They said, you know, if I was the one making the hiring decision, I never would have hired you. And I said, why? They said, well, your name is Vartanush. And at the time I was Defter Dedi, I'm not Hindu. And they're like, we're a litigator. I have to stand up and introduce you. And I can't say your name properly. And that would be embarrassing to me. So if I had to pick between you and Jane Smith, I'd go with Jane Smith because your name's just too hard, even though you're awesome as a lawyer, right? So like that's like literally said that to me. This isn't like 20, 30 years ago, right? This is like 8 years ago. Someone who was like not that much older than me. So I've always been cognizant that in a lot of spaces, I am representative of our people. And so it kind of like I know that I have to make sure that I leave a good impression and knock things out of the park because if like first impressions last for people. So if their first impression of an Armenian woman is negative, it might close the door for others. The other piece is because I knew I didn't know what the legal field was, right? I didn't know what in-house legal was when I was in law school. They don't teach you those things, at least in the US law schools. I want to make sure that I give those opportunities and paths to others, right? Like I try to be an open book. Like, so yes, I'm the co-chair of the Young Lawyers Committee. I'm not a young lawyer anymore, but like I love that audience because that's the next generation. That's where I was when I didn't know what I was doing, right? And opening doors. And there's this great analogy that like someone once said to me that I always think about in this space is that once you ride the elevator up, remember to send it back down, right? To bring the next generation up. And I always think about that of like, and it might not even be the next generation, it might be my generation that just hasn't had the door open to them. And really, I think it influences how I behave. Like oftentimes people would reach out to me that were my colleagues are like, oh, I know this law student that's Armenian. Do you want to talk to them? I was like, yes, always send them all to me, right? I did this like first generation mentorship program at Berkeley once I graduated, and the director knew to send every Armenian student my way because I was the only volunteer that was Armenian in this program. So it has had its challenges, right? But I think it's only made me better. So now I make jokes potentially and like teach people that my name means like sweet rose in Armenian or whatnot. And like I don't shy away from it. I haven't like changed my name to make it easier for the people necessarily, right? Like so it has made everything about who I am where like the Armenianness has been such a big part of me. But I always remember that like our community is incredible. Like look at this panel that I'm sitting with, right? Incredible women who have done such things and like you just have to keep asking and looking around and you'll find that we're literally in every random city, random industry that you can think of. And I think it's up to us to help each other up and make sure we succeed.
Thank you, Bhakti. That's very important to all of us. So I'm glad you touched on it. So now, what do you think it feels? What does it mean to you to be an Armenian woman in law?
No, I mean, I think I resonate with a lot of what Varti was saying, but generally, I think, we shouldn't be afraid to speak up. We shouldn't be afraid to make our opinions known. I think we have a lot of opportunities that were given to us. And I think we should be proud of also our heritage, and we should be proud that we have an additional culture that we're able to embrace. And we're, even language is such a great tool. So I think just being able to kind of surround yourself by like-minded people, uplift others. I think our generation and the next generation, I see it often like with mentoring, like you're never too old to mentor. You always want to find somebody that has that greater experience than you, and you want to be able to give back as well, which I think is key because ultimately you want to build a successful community and see many different people rise together.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, Vati has to leave soon, so we're going to have a Q&A session. And if anyone has any questions specifically to Vati, it would be a great time to please ask them now.
One thing, Laura, I actually have a little bit extra time. I got extra childcare, so I could hang out till the end.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. We're going to begin the Q&A session now. So if anybody has any questions for any of the panelists, either on Zoom or the ones here in person, please, this is the time to ask them. I have a question, so I guess I will be both an audience member and a moderator. So my question is, what is a skill that you wish you gained when you started working in house? And anyone can answer this question because you're all in house. So what is a skill that you wish you knew, for example, in the years that you were going to law school or doing work in firm? What is something that you would say you would give advice to let's say a law student such as myself who wants to go in house? What would you say is the best advice?
I can start. I think we
Thank you.
touched upon it earlier. Many of us were saying you touch upon so many different topics and matters when you're in house. So it's important to remember to give yourself some grace and not to feel intimidated, but to keep yourself confidence and keep going and moving forward. You have to remember that you have the skill set. You've been trained for this. Yes, you may not have the answers to every matter that's coming your way, but like we were saying earlier, you're in different industries and different organizations. You quickly realize that there's a lot you need to learn that you don't know about the business, the people, etc., how the culture works from one organization to another. These are not things that you necessarily learn in law school. So in law school, you take all of the technical learnings, and then you apply that and know that you can apply it, you can do it. Find yourself some great mentors, surround yourself with the right people, and just do it. You may not have the answers, and that's okay. That's what you're there for. You're there to figure it out, and you're there to be able to make a positive difference and show people that you can navigate all of these different situations. And so take your learnings and just run with it.
I'm going to add that confidence is going to be an important key throughout your career.
Absolutely.
Because, we were talking about what existed 30 years, 40 years ago, and what exists today. We're talking about accessibility. We're talking about privacy, social media. These are all things that even now, with 20 some years of experience, I don't know. I have to read up on it. I have to understand the new legislation. So confidence is key, and all you have to remember is it's okay if you don't know something. You'll figure it out because you're smart. You went to law school.
Just
of
be
course
curious.
You will.
Yeah. Be curious and go and learn and keep reading. Don't stop learning. It's not because you left law school that you're done. It's an ongoing learning.
Now, one thing I wanted to add to that is kind of taking it, if you go back a little bit, we were talking about outside counsel having read up on our industries, etc. It's actually true as law students too, or beginning lawyers. If you're really passionate about a particular industry, right? Let's say you're in law school and or a junior attorney that's not in this space and you want to go into entertainment law, or if you want to go into social media companies, etc., know what's happening in the industry. Like, I'm not talking about the law, the industry, right? Like, you need to know what are the business issues, etc. And so there are a lot of trade journals or whatnot. Like, if it's entertainment, make sure you're reading Variety. So, like, you need to know what's happening so that you can converse with the people when you're applying for the job, right? And when you get in, you'll know what are the issues that are keeping the executives up at night, essentially. But that will actually, just knowing that will also put you a foot above, or put you ahead of everybody else you're applying for the same job as for, because it'll show your commitment, your passion to the field. So that's not, there's some people that don't really care which field it might be, a type of job, etc. But if that does exist, I would say that's another piece where early on it moves mountains.
Thank you,
I'd
Vati.
like to add something too, if I may. Thank you, Vati.
Yes, please.
So, what I've learned in the pandemic is the importance of being flexible and being able to roll with the punches. And when you work in-house, you'll notice that the management has a tendency to change. So you'll have executives come and go, and that creates a lot of turmoil in the company. And your role is to be a trusted advisor to the business. And the way you do that is that you have to foster communication among the departments, because oftentimes the attorney will be the central point for a project. And so you have to make sure that all the departments communicate amongst each other and that those communication lines remain open. And so you're the actual point person, and you have to make sure that you're not siloed in the whole company and that you learn about matters at the end. You have to make sure that you gain your colleagues' trust and that they bring you in a project at the front end as opposed to the back end, because you want to avoid having a deal being negotiated, baked, and then legal finds out about it. And as Sona mentioned, you don't want to be a roadblock or like you don't want to be a clog and throwing a wrench in their plans. So you have to make sure that communication is open amongst all the departments, you remain flexible, and also, most of all, that the other departments get your legal perspective up front, so that if there are any issues that arise, they are addressed at the beginning as opposed to at the end. That creates delays. And the last thing you want to do is to be the bearer of bad news. I remember when I joined companies, at first when I show up at people's offices, the first reaction I get is, oh my God, what did I do wrong? And you try to avoid that, and you try to make sure that they gain your respect and they come to you to get your legal perspective. And that will go a long way, fostering communication and becoming a solid advisor for your company through gaining the trust of your colleagues.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan.
I just want to add one more thing, if I may. I think to the people who are at the beginning of their careers, in-house is a lot of fun, and I strongly recommend it. But don't turn your back to private practice. I think it's a very good school. It builds character, it gives you thick skin, and it gives you the opportunity to see a lot more. When you go into in-house very early on in your career, I think you're too green. You haven't seen enough. And that's why I would recommend starting out in private practice and then making the jump over to in-house afterwards.
Thank you, Karen. Oh, we have some questions from the audience. Yes, please.
I would just add also, it wouldn't hurt to take some business courses, or even the MBA, or I know the Canadian Corporate Counsel Association has the CIC program. My question was for promotion in politics, office politics. What would you say the sort of differences between private practice and in-house that you observe?
I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, I think it's going to vary on the organization because when you're in I'm going to go back to startup tech environment, you are building as you're going around what are the different policies, right? I think in a law firm, it's much more robust, very structured. I think, there's like a manual almost and a guide of like what you can and cannot do. But I think in-house, you're kind of developing as you're going. Like I know when we were working with HR, we probably amended the HR policy like 6 times because it's a learning experience, right? And in addition to that, depending on your business, you have maybe international employees. So we're dealing with call centers in the Philippines and in Egypt. So how do you embed some of your policies and guidelines to people in Egypt and in Philippines, right? It's different. Who's overseeing that? So I think you need to be able to not have such a structured set of guidelines, if you will, and be able to adapt it as the business is growing and changing, because naturally you're going to have to make changes as you go.
I want to add to that too. Oh, Dalita, go ahead if you want to.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I just want to point out the differences in a law firm. You have a specific career track where you're going from a junior associate to associate, and the ultimate goal is to become a partner. But when you're in-house, you're open to any possibilities where you can become eventually the general counsel or the chief legal officer. You can go back to firm life. You can go to the business side and stop practicing law and become a deal maker. So it can lead to a lot of great ventures. So it's completely open when you're in-house. It's any possibilities. But I completely agree with Karen that having a law firm practice as a basis will give you the discipline and the knowledge and very good skill sets and tools to become a good lawyer. It's actually a really good foundation to actually then afterwards transitioning to in-house. So Karen, I agree with you 100%.
Thank you, Susan.
just want to add sorry quickly to the politics piece. I was just going to say it's important also to understand the culture beyond the business side of the organization that you're in. I've been in, a couple of different industries now, and they all, work a little bit differently. If they're multinationals, sometimes they have that same mentality. If they're more established, they have a certain way of doing things. So you're not there, you're there to innovate, yes, but you need to understand how things work, so that you have, let's say, minimal ripple effect when you're trying to do your job. So I think understanding that is key, but yet to have the courage to innovate and bring your ideas forward.
Thank you. Michael, please go ahead.
Yes, Karen, you of course alluded to it. You had some private practice experience before you transitioned to in-house life. I've been in private practice for a long time. We've observed in private practice that we have no challenges bringing in women, hiring them, training them well, getting along with them perfectly, but there's this flight out of private practice we've observed. There's more women that finish law school than men typically, yet, primarily at a partnership level, there aren't as many women. And so now, of course, you're in-house. Are there any tips that you could give to people like me who are trying to grow a firm and retain the best and the brightest to become my partners?
Right.
What could we do to keep them?
I love your question, and I'm going to tell you that unfortunately, the law firm model needs to adapt, because let's not kid each other. At home, though the men have stepped up, a lot of the burden's on the women still, and the moms are doing a lot at home and a lot at the office. And I love to see men go on paternity leave. Wow, we never saw that 30 years ago. And to see them doing it now, you're thinking, okay, so they're coming to our side and they're understanding the importance of balancing. So though the model needs to change, it's nice to see the men changing too, so that it makes it okay to want to have a balanced life and to realize, yeah, I need to build, yes, I need to work, but I also need to invest time and energy for my family.
One of the other things
And that it'll encourage women to stay in.
Thank you, Karen. That's a great
Yeah.
response.
That's a really, I
Absolutely.
echo with that 100%. And I think another thing I would recommend is have a career plan for that person. Oftentimes I don't know what the experience was like, but I felt you kind of go in private practice, you start, you have your partners, you're getting mandates, but you're a bit like left on the side almost. So what happens is your ambitions are a little bit bottled. You feel like you're kind of cornered. You want to be able to discuss some of the creative ideas that you want to bring forth. Maybe you want to do more business development, maybe. So I think sitting down and having a career plan and asking, the person like, okay, where do you see yourself in the next year or two? Are there other initiatives you'd like to take within the company? Maybe they want to start like a group in the organization. Give conferences where they're encouraging other female lawyers to come in. So I think that those initiatives also will most likely encourage to retain more female lawyers in a private practice.
I see it as a huge opportunity, really, for knowing that again, there is this flight from private practice to in-house life, or so observed for females, women. So the opportunities at the partnership level and the relationships that could be built, and no doubt, on the diversity, equity, inclusion mandates that even large companies have, you want to make sure that law firms that you're working with, your partners, are well represented even at the partner level as well. So, that's key. So thanks for those tips.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to add actually is intentionality with the junior and mid levels in the way you work with them, not just on the projects, but a lot of stuff. And I think a lot of when junior lawyers are going up the ranks, a lot of the wheeling and dealing and the cool projects and the stuff happen not like they happen after hours or at a lunch or at a coffee or whatnot, right? Like when you invite them over to sit in on a meeting that you're having with the biggest client of the firm. And so if you're not intentional to make sure that it's not just the male associate who is being proactive or sitting next to you, right? That happens to be like bringing up all those associates. That's how you really end up creating a space for the female attorneys to also thrive, right? It's both about sponsorship and mentorship. And I think if there needs to be more intentionality. So I can compare my first firm to my second firm where there was intentionality at the second firm, right? To make sure that I was taking the depositions, that I was in the meetings with all the clients, versus at the first firm, sometimes there wasn't that, right? Where the partner was like, well, it's my client, I will be there, and you, junior associate, don't necessarily need to be there, and even if they're the up and coming star, right? I think sometimes you are trying to be cost effective, right? I know clients don't like to have multiple names on something and be billing, but maybe take the hit a little bit and bring in for the opportunities. Think about the lunches, take them to the lunches and the after work events so that when you're off the clock, you're talking about those things. But because we find some of the advancement happens on the golf courses. They happen at the drinks after work when people are just shooting the shit, right? Like, let's just all be honest. Like, that's where you build your camaraderie. And if you have camaraderie, you're going to sponsor the next person. So oftentimes what we see is that like hangs out with like because it's comfortable. So get out of your comfort zone and allow the space, because yes, there are things at the home, etc. But honestly, like that's not what's going to keep people. Like I think they're if you allow for the opportunities and you find that you're bringing up your talent pool, they will stay for some of the opportunities. It may not be everybody, right? You may not get like 100% of people staying, but I think that a lot of what has happened in the past and why there aren't the partner ranks right now is some of that behind the scenes not having had the opportunities within the firm.
Yeah. I want to add something too, if I may. Don't be afraid to promote your women. I mean, you're dealing with obviously women who are there, very ambitious women. And when you're ambitious, you probably have ambitions in other spaces of your life as well. And so I think Karen touched upon it too. You don't want to be ambitious only in one space. You want, if some of us have families and kids, you want to be 100%. I say it's not possible. You want to be 110% in your career. You want to be 110% for your family. You want to be 110%, which is unrealistic, obviously. But keep in mind, you're dealing with, very ambitious women, and they want to do their best in so many different spaces. And so if you're giving them the opportunity and allowing them to shine in that space, then they'll be able to continue to shine in other spaces.
I'm just going to add one thing to the shining opportunity, because, going into trial and being second chair as a woman is a great opportunity, but having no opportunity to actually do any talking, no good. Yes, you brought a woman along, but you need to share the spotlight. And traditionally, it's been difficult for men to come to the table and be open about that, but I think times are changing and we're going to be moving towards that.
I think we could have a whole panel just on this question. It's so interesting. Before I ask my question, I'm going to make a comment just because I'm also a woman in private practice. I've also seen the exodus and it worries me. And one thing that I think that is an opportunity with having, however, women in-house is that now we, as women in private practice, have a vis-a-vis that's growing, that's similar in image. And that's an opportunity that I see, that I can reach out to potential clients that I kind of feel like are a reflection of me, because just like men have had their partnerships for a while, women are having now this other opportunity. Yes, we want, collaboration between everybody, but that's also maybe part of this shift. And the fact that, we're navigating, we have to say it, an industry and a profession that was built by men, on their terms and in their language, and it has to keep evolving so that it's more inclusive to how everybody sees the profession going forward. And the fact that we're having this conversation is part of that, I think. Yeah, it's great. But my question was, you guys touched upon how you choose outside counsel, and like you obviously want people who know your industry, who have who understand your interests. And then you also touched upon the fact that it's tough to be an inside counsel, which I have friends who also said exactly the same things, that we're like the bearer of bad news and they see us negatively, and we have to show ourselves as a positive, partner. So how can we as outside counsel help you guys do that more? Like, is there anything that you think that outside counsel can do to help position you or to help further your positive kind of image inside your industries or your corporations?
Keep it short and simple,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're giving me an opinion, I time is of the essence for me to digest it and then try and draft something that's going to be comprehensible internally is just a waste of my time when I've paid you already to give me the answer. So yes, I understand that you want to cover all the corners and make sure that you've not left one rock unturned. I don't have time for that. Keep it short and simple so that I can pass on the message without having to spend a lot of time figuring out what it was that you were trying to tell me.
And another thing I would say is think outside the box, because oftentimes outside counsel will come to you with the problem and they're going to say, this is the problem and you cannot do this. But then you tell them, okay, well, then what can I do? What's the solution? And they haven't thought about that. So then again, it kind of falls on you to go back and try to figure it out. And I think that doesn't create a positive image with your C-suite. And then it creates frustration because then you have your CO or CEO, they're like, well, why are we paying them for? I get it, we can't do this. But what are they saying? What can we do, right? So I think really that would be a big thing. And I think that would be a huge differentiating factor.
Yeah, well, I'll echo the same thing. You need to be solution oriented because we need to be able to move. Okay, we can't move this way, but help me understand how can I potentially move as the business wants to get it done. So
yeah, no is not an option.
Yeah, no, exactly. No is not an option.
it puts us in a difficult spot. And so if you can appreciate that and do the research to help us accordingly, because we can do the research as well, but it's what are you bringing differently to help me move? What is it that I perhaps don't have the time to dig into further or to notice or to know about because there's something new and you're able to find that for me? That would definitely help.
One of the other things that some of our best outside counsel do, like I think the advice the rest of the panel said is actually more important, but for the other thing that the best outside counsel we use do is on a quite regular basis, they'll ask us if we want a training from them on an evolving topic, right? And so that will create a relationship with the outside counsel and our particular legal team or a slightly larger legal team to talk about, like, right now in the AI is a big issue, right? To talk about AI issues for us in marketing, or in the US, there's a lot of youth legal data issues. So they'll want to do something like that. And it helps create the baseline. So we ask you better questions when we come to outside counsel, but also helps us be prepared for when someone comes to us off the cuff. So I think helping create that relationship, and then the solutions oriented, like we don't want just a problem statement, right? How help us make a decision with that.
We're going to be taking our last question from Bob. Please go ahead.
I have 2 questions.
It counts as one.
I'm elected with the moderator, so I can take some liberties.
Can I ask if he speaks up louder or comes a little closer?
I can repeat the question.
You've all mentioned compliance as part of your role. I recognize it's a very broad subject, but what are some of the aspects of it, and how are you trained in order to manage that part of your role?
Let me repeat the question for the people on Zoom. The question is regarding compliance and how you manage compliance for people in that role and how you train people. Please, anyone can chime in.
I'm gonna start because
Thank you.
we're very highly regulated, and as much on the airline side as we are on the tour operator side and the travel agency side. So really, I knew none of this when I came in. So you need to hit the ground running, and you need to ask the right questions and not be shy and be confident that it's okay if you don't know the answer, because I can't spend hours and hours researching what are the rules, I need to get into it right away. And honestly, being exposed to it is the best experience, and that's the best way to learn. And you know, it's not fun when the regulatory bodies are knocking at your door, but you need to be transparent and you need to be collaborative because that counts, and they appreciate that. And you want to show the authority that I want to be compliant. We may have dropped the ball somewhere, but it was human error. It's not an intentional non-compliance.
Yeah, and I guess if I can add to that a little bit to what I was touching on before, you want to leverage data and technology in order to get that transparency and see what do I need to do with respect to compliance. You know, do I need to have additional training? Do I need to put a compliance program? And you even start at the basis with a compliance risk registry, and it doesn't need to be something as complex, but you do, you know, threefold, like what's the impact if it's materialized, like what's the likelihood of occurrence, and then you have a risk reasoning, and you do this per department, and you have a tracking system, so you kind of have visibility and you're able to kind of jot down where that falls on the compliance and risk balance. So there's a lot of technological ways. Utilize your tech savvy people within the organization, and leverage that data because it will give you a lot of answers to what you're looking for.
Thank you. Please go ahead with the second question.
Okay, it's a very short one. Does your firm hire summer law students or articling students? And if so, what specific background and skill sets do you look for?
The question.
Company?
Oh, sorry. Let me just repeat the question for the people on Zoom. He's asking whether the in-house companies or the companies where the in-house lawyers work for, whether they hire summer students or articling students, and what do they usually look for?
I can start. I've been in organizations where, yes, we'll have, particularly during the summertime, some students that are already enrolled in law school. And so just to give us a little bit of a lift, to give back also, to be able to get them to be exposed to what the environment looks like. They help us with a bit of research. Some other companies also allow for articling students. That's also a great program to have because, yes, it's an investment, but you're investing in the future lawyers and your peers coming up in the pipeline. And so, yes, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. It's a win-win for everyone. We get some additional help. And at the same time, we're able to, support the next generation of professionals coming up.
Vati and Susan, would you guys like this chime in?
Sure. Unfortunately, my company and my prior company were not as robust programs. So at Disney and now at Meta, Meta does not hire students, and Disney would hire one law student. But I will say that they do a lot of programs. So they're like diversity programs where you're allowed to shadow somebody. Some of these very large companies will focus their efforts on diversity hires. And what I mean by that is they'll be first generation professionals, people from underrepresented backgrounds. What I like to remind Armenians often is that we are diverse. I know we may look whiter than some of our other, other ethnic backgrounds, but Armenians often forget because we're, I think, in the act of wanting to assimilate more, but a lot of our so Armenian students don't end up taking advantage of these opportunities and applying to them, right? But they exist, but a lot of the larger companies will focus on those because we're not hiring out of law school to begin with, right? We're hiring many years out. So the law student space for us is just providing opportunity and less something we see as like a pipeline.
Thank you, Vati.
Yes, so
Susan,
I'd like
please
to
go.
add, sure. I'd like to add that yes, the companies where I've worked, we have hired summer associates or students, and it's been a very rewarding experience. I find that they are very eager to help out, and so they're involved in projects. You know, we get them started with that, and before the end of the day, they come to my office and they're like, "Is there anything else I can help you with? I'm really glad to assist." So that's a breath of fresh air. And also what's very rewarding is that, you know, they're new, they're starting off, and what is very, very nice is that when you explain the law to them and it clicks and you see that they get it, you know that it gives you a sense of like accomplishment where, you know what, I actually am helping this person's career. So you get to mentor them, you get to teach them, and you also tell them how to, the business aspect, because, law is not just practicing, it's being able to understand the business. So you're kind of giving them a dual training in law and in business, and it can be very rewarding. So yes, we do hire students with experience.
Susan, I actually have a follow-up question for that.
Sure.
When hiring these students, what do you look for in them? Like, what are the characteristics? What makes someone stand out to you?
Okay, so I'm sorry, go ahead. You were saying something else?
Oh, I was gonna say even as perhaps not a student, but a junior associate or someone who just came out of the articling process.
Yes. So our biggest challenge I find is someone who wants to practice in our area of the law. So I'm in commercial real estate law, and the biggest challenge we have is we have a lot of students or junior associates who are not interested in commercial real estate law. It's finding someone who wants to practice in that area, because oftentimes, we can train to a certain extent, but we can't spend all of our time, especially for a junior associate, starting from scratch, and then they don't end up staying because that's not the field they want to practice in. So for example, if you have a student or a junior associate that wants to do tax law, and they just come in to your department as a stepping stone because they can't find something else, you spend all this time training, and then they leave in 3 to 6 months. And so that's taxing on us. And so we're looking for someone who is eager, who is timely, who arrives to work on time. I'm shocked at the number of people that show up to work at like 10 a.m. when the company is starting at 8:39. So timeliness, and also wanting to work in that area of the law, and showing eagerness, and the most important thing, asking questions. Someone who shows interest and who wants to listen. So the most important thing when you're a lawyer is not to talk, it's to listen. And we're talking about active listening. So that's a very specific trait that I recommend that the students or junior associates develop. Active listening. It's 80% active listening and 20% speaking.
Thank you, Susan. Would anyone else like to chime in?
Yes. I just want to say that as a Gen Xer, I had to begin working with boomers. And so I had to adapt to their style. And I had to take into consideration that we got to do it their way because there's no other way that's going to work. And what I've noticed with the younger generations who've now come in is that they're not thinking we need to adapt to the style of the older lawyers. And coming in at 10, as Susan mentioned, yeah, that doesn't fly. We've got lawyers who are still boomers and still working, who are coming in at 6 a.m. So you don't look good when you show up at 10. And everybody wants work-life balance. I am not against it, but there is a limit to how much work-life balance you can expect. And going in-house does not necessarily mean you're not putting in the hours. There's still an expectation there. So just bear in mind the people you're working with, and not everybody is going to be cool with the Gen Y style of life.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone, for all your questions and for listening and participating in our discussion. And thank you to our panelists as well, both here and online. Thank you so much for joining. Now I'm going to pass the ball to Harry.
Thank you, everybody, again for being here. For those of you who are online, for our panelists who are online, and also our panelists who are here. I wanted to point out that on April 12 in New York City, in the Yale Club on Vanderbilt Avenue, we have our annual Public Servants Dinner, the Armenian Bar Association, where we'll be honoring the New York Chief Appellate Judge Anthony Rowan, who will be honored along with longtime AGBU Chair Berj Setrakian. It's a wonderful event in the Yale Club and a wonderful, wonderful venue on Friday night. So if those of you who are in New York or would like to be in New York on a Friday in just a few weeks' time, registrations closed yesterday, but exceptions can be made. I know it's not sold out yet, but it does always sell out. So please consider attending that. As far as activities in Montreal go, we are planning a series of activities, and those of you who are interested in getting involved in organizing activities, I invite you to reach out to either me or to Manu Galemian or Sevana Poladian, who have agreed to volunteer, and so that we can be more active and follow our friends who are here with us from Ontario and eventually have an Armenian Bar Association chapter. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.